Hey Crossway fam, excited to be with you today. As you can tell, things aren't as they traditionally are. We record sermons ahead of time periodically in case we have to fill in a spot somewhere. And so that's what this is. This is something we recorded ahead of time for a moment like this one. So I'm excited to be with you. I'm excited to share the word with you today and just talk about a particular experience from Jesus' life and how this changed lives, invites us into a changed life, and helps us practice the way of Jesus together. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 2 today. If you have a Bible, you can turn there, or you can look on your phone, or just follow along. There'll be verses on the screen. So I don't know about you. I lose perspective kind of all the time. For instance, one time we're at some friends of ours' house, and these friends have like a whitish, light grayish carpet. And one of my kids, I still to this day don't know which one, had a glass of chocolate milk, spilled it onto my friend's carpet. And instead of cleaning it up or even telling us what happened, they moved an ottoman over the spot where the chocolate milk had gotten into the white carpet. And so maybe 24, 48 hours later, we moved the ottoman and our jaws dropped. We're like, who spilled chocolate milk here in the carpet? We couldn't believe our eyes. In this moment, I love my children. I adore them. I'm committed to them. Obviously, I would give my life for them. But in that moment, I lost perspective. Or all the time, what happens in my house, I don't know what happens in yours, is we'll be sitting down in the living room and we hear ding, ding, and it's our refrigerator. And the doors are standing wide open. And there's no one in sight. We're like, who came into the kitchen, got some other refrigerator, left the doors open, and other refrigerators dinging at us from the living room? Or, man, this one's almost every day. We'll make dinner. My wife will make dinner. I'll make dinner. We'll make dinner together. My two youngest, my girls, will just kind of move the food around on their plate. And then about 45 minutes later, after we've put dinner away, cleaned up the kitchen, every parent in the room knows what 2 words my kids tell me. 45 minutes later, we'll be sitting around, my kids will walk in and say, Mom, Dad, that's right, I'm hungry. And I'll be like, okay. Well, you didn't eat your dinner, so that's why you're hungry. I didn't like it. I'm hungry now. Okay. What do you want? I don't know. What do we have? And so you go through this long list of everything that's in the house, and they're like, I don't want that. I don't want that. I don't want that. And finally, they're like, I just want cereal. This is what I mean. Like, I lose perspective all the time. Being married is a lifelong commitment that your spouse will be exactly where you need to be in the kitchen at all times when you need something from the kitchen. That's what marriage is. It's like, oh, someone's going to be standing where you need something. I lose perspective. And it's not just my family. Like, my wife will send me to the grocery store to say, get dishwasher soap and cheese for crackers. And I'll come back like an hour and a half later, have like 17 bags. She'll be like, what did you buy? I'm like, I got just the essentials. Just the essentials. Just the things we absolutely need. But they had a special on kumquat jelly. I needed to get that. But it's okay, honey. I got the dishwasher soap that you wanted me to, and the crackers for that cheese we have. And she's like, oh my goodness, she feels like she wants to kill me. Right, why? Because we lose perspective all the time. The thing is, like, we go through life, and we say that, we lose perspective. But sometimes it feels like we never had perspective. Like, I'm talking about frustrations in my family, but obviously I love and adore my family. But we go through life and we lose perspective, or maybe we never even had it. Like, something comes up, we get frustrated, we get angry, we respond badly. And it's not that we lost perspective, but maybe we lacked perspective all along. So we're going to be in Mark chapter 2, like I said. And what Jesus does in this passage is he gives people an eternal perspective. He pulls back from their problems, their issues, and shows them a broader sense of what's going on in their life. Perspective is defined as the capacity to view things in their true relation or relative importance. They're how important something really is. And what Jesus does in this story is he shows people what's actually important, what's most important. See, Jesus gives us the ability to see what could be and what will be. To what could happen with our life, to show us our giftedness and what our life could be if we live on mission for him. He also frames our life in terms of what will be, the promise he's made, his own faithfulness. So Jesus gives us the ability to see what could be and what will be. So Mark chapter 2 starts this way. Mark 2 verse 1 says, "A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home." Now when a passage starts that way, it says a few days later, to understand what's happening here, you have to go a few days earlier, because the author includes that because you need context to understand this. And a few days earlier, what had happened was Jesus healed a leper. And he told this leper at the end, he said, "Bro, whatever you do, don't tell anyone what I did for you." They're going to say, "Hey man, weren't you that guy? And I thought you had," and you're supposed to say, yeah, that's fine. And you keep it stepping, keep it moving. But don't tell anyone what I did for you. And what did the guy do? He went and told everyone. He told everyone he came in contact with. He would bring it up. He would start conversations with it. He went around, man. He was whistling and telling people, "Jesus saved me from leprosy," right? He just wouldn't stop talking about it. And so, because this guy wouldn't stop talking about it, what you see here in the second verse is that Jesus had gained so much attention. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such a large number that there was no room left, not even outside the door. And he preached the word to them. And so because this guy shared everywhere he could about what Jesus did for him, Jesus then couldn't go anywhere without people mobbing him. So he was in a home, probably pretty different from this one, right? The homes back then were made out of hardened mud and probably a large room based on the house. It might have been several rooms based on the finances of the person who owned it. But, very, very different from this one. But he was in a house. And because he was there teaching, kind of have a rabbinic Bible study type thing, people came and listened. But as he was teaching and talking, more and more people streamed in. And so it got to the point where this house is standing room only. Right? It's there's just enough room for the people, and they're standing, and it's crowded. And it started out with a few people, and the group swelled and got bigger and bigger and bigger until this house is packed full of people. You could point back to the guy who Jesus healed, who spread the news everywhere. And it says in verse 3, "Some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man, carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it, and then lowered the mat the man was lying on." And so what you have here is you have these 4 guys who carry this paralyzed man to Jesus. But when they got to the home where they heard he was, it was too packed. They couldn't get in. There was too many people. The crowd was pressing in on him, but they weren't going to be denied. They went above and beyond, literally. They climbed onto the roof of the house. And as this hardened mud house, they were climbing on top of it, they began digging through the ceiling of the house. I picture this, in every teen movie ever, somebody has a little study session that turns into a crazy house party. You've probably seen a movie like this. I picture this Jesus is going to have a little rabbinic Bible teaching, and more people start streaming in, and then the owner of the house is like, "Don't break the vase. That's classic to my family." They're kind of freaking out. I picture the owner of this home being like this. He's like, "Oh, stop. There's too many people in my house. Stop. And the straw that broke the camel's back is these 4 guys carry this guy to Jesus, and they can't get in. It's too packed. And so they scratch away at his ceiling. The original language literally says that they dug away his ceiling and lowered him down through the hole. This has been a dramatic scene. But this is these 4 guys, these friends, who literally but relationally, they went above and beyond. And from this point on in the story, what I want you to get, every single thing Jesus says is giving someone eternal perspective. There are people who have thoughts. There are people who have feelings, who are thinking things, interacting with things, and they have wants from Jesus. And Jesus is going to know that want, understand that sentiment, and then redirect them with an eternal perspective. Redirect them with understanding what their life could be and will be. And so we're going to keep reading here in verse 5. And verse 5, by the way, it's enigmatic. It's confusing. You have to dive into it to understand at all. But the words in it are so nuanced and beautiful, but challenging. It says in verse 5, when Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." And the first question this raises is, when Jesus saw their faith. Now, different Bible scholars see this differently. Some see "their" as there. When Jesus saw their faith, the guys who lowered him down through the hole, he forgave his sins. Which is it's hard to wrap our minds around. Why did he get forgiven based on their faith? Some Bible scholars say that, no, it was all 5 of them. They had a collective faith. Clearly this guy got the 4 guys above to carry him from his hometown and to dig through and lower down. But regardless, there was some picture here of a faith that was shared. In our Western American church worldview, we have a very individualistic, individualized faith. Right? My personal relationship with Jesus. And that's true. There is obviously definitely that aspect to faith in Jesus. But in the people here, the original author, these people, Jesus' mindset, there is this personal faith, but there's also this collective communal faith. What does the Bible say? If my people who are called by my name collectively will humble themselves and pray. There are all these challenges to not a person, a personal faith, but to a communal, collective faith as well. There's even a passage, that says you should work out your own salvation. Well, that's individual. You should work out your own salvation. But a couple verses later, it's talking about how that if you work out your own salvation, there will be a collective rejoicing in the church. It says this plural you. If you individually work out your own salvation, you all will rejoice. Because every individual faith journey impacts the health of the whole. And so yes, there is an individual, but there is a collective. So I think there's something communal and beautiful and collective about the faith here that at first, glance we miss, because it is their faith that caused Jesus to forgive him. But this guy didn't come to, maybe he did. It doesn't say what his motivation is. But I don't think this guy came to Jesus because he wanted forgiveness, right? What did he want? He can't walk. His friends carried him so he could walk out. So he could walk. The hope was this dude carries his own mat home. And so when Jesus says, "Oh, I see your faith. Your sins are forgiven." I bet his buddies up top are like, "Wait, I got to lift his forgiven behind up through the hole in this house? I got to carry his forgiven behind all the way home?" No, that wasn't the plan. The plan was he carries his own mat as he walks on his healed legs home. That's not what Jesus does. Jesus doesn't heal him. He forgives him. But put yourself in the situation. Let's say that you know this guy. And maybe he's been paralyzed his whole life. The only way that he can support himself or add to their communal family is to go and beg. Probably this is a guy who doesn't have he wasn't mentored, he wasn't apprenticed, he doesn't have a vocation he can fall back on or any sort of training. And so what do you have? You have this guy, maybe in a month, the shock and amazement has worn off, and now he's, begging again? Or maybe he starts at the bottom and he becomes an apprentice somewhere. See, if all Jesus does is heal him, this guy is going to have more problems. Different problems, but more problems. And what a missed opportunity if this guy gets carried to Jesus and leaves and never commits his life to following Jesus, or is never forgiven like he is here. Do you see how what he wanted from Jesus was not Jesus' best for him? Is that not how we approach Jesus so often? Jesus, I need this. I need you to take this away. But this step, this season, this challenge, this pain, could it be a step in the story Jesus is writing for you? And so we say, Jesus, I want this. Or I don't want this. And Jesus is saying, no, you don't understand what could be in your life. So you have this guy, and he is lowered down, and Jesus forgives his sin. And we keep reading. In verse 6, now some teachers of the law who were sitting there, thinking to themselves, why does this fellow talk like that? He is blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? And to understand this, you have, think about it for a second. If I was out somewhere, like at a restaurant, and I saw two people arguing, and then guy A took a swing on guy B. And I pulled him aside. I was like, stop arguing. And I spoke to guy A. Hey, stop arguing. Just so you know, you shouldn't have hit this guy, but you're forgiven. And the second guy is like, you can't forgive him. He didn't punch you in the face. He didn't sin against you. Only I can forgive him, because that sin was against me. And so when Jesus says your sin is forgiven, he's saying something theologically profound that a few people present pick up on. They're like, wait, who does he think he is? Why does he say he can forgive sins? Sins are against God. Only God can forgive sins. And so this is what they're thinking. And based on what they know, Jesus is new to the scene. This is an appropriate thing to think. They don't know who Jesus is. They don't know what he's here for. They don't know the end of the story, right? We see this thing, hindsight being 2020, but they didn't know all of this. He's just like a new rabbi who's walking around and teaching and can apparently do miracles. And so we're going to keep reading in verse 8. Immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts. He kind of pulled like a Professor X, from X-Men, Charles Xavier. He's reading their mind. And he's like, I can tell what you're thinking. You're thinking, how can this guy say he forgives sins? Why are you thinking these things? Remember what I told you earlier, by the way. From that point on, everything he does, everything he's going to say is going to give someone an eternal perspective, pull them away from their here, right now, short-term perspective. He's going to show them what their life could be and will be. Which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your mat, and walk? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. And this phrase, Son of Man, this would have been like a judo throw, or like an inside joke, but not a joke, like an inside reference, that only these, it says, these teachers of the law, these Pharisees would have got. That's a very specific reference to the book of Daniel. In the book of Daniel, the Jewish people are oppressed, enslaved by the Babylonians, and Daniel is among them. At one point, Daniel falls into a deep sleep, and he has a dream. And in that dream, there are these 4 beasts. And that over the course of his dream, then these 4 beasts, as the dream goes on, they get more and more bizarre sounding until the 4th beast, it's hard to even wrap your mind around what this thing looks like. But by the end of the dream, you see a picture of God in his throne room in heaven. And he destroys these beasts. And then off to the side, next to God's throne, there's another throne. And the book of Daniel says that upon that throne, there is a Son of Man. And this Son of Man, there are additional people crowding around his throne, on the throne of the Son of Man, and they're praising him and they're worshiping as if he were God. And it's this dream that the beasts represent people on earth, specific evil leaders, like the Babylonians, the Romans who were going to come, people who were going to oppress the Jewish people, but in a broader sense, they represent evil leaders. And even in a broader sense, they represent oppressive forces that impact people's lives. And so in this dream from the throne room, God destroys these beasts. And the Son of Man is there as well. And the Son of Man is worshipped as God, but also he's just called the Son of Man. And what Jesus does here, when he calls himself Son of Man, and everywhere else he calls himself Son of Man, is he's pointing to that. And he's telling these people, these teachers of the law, hey man, you know this reference. This reference, it's talking about me. Like, I've come to set you free. I've come so that evil, bad leaders, people who would oppress, people who would take freedoms, like I come to keep those people back. Like I am staking claim on this world now. No one can move beyond my level of control of them. Like he's making these big, bold statements, and in a way that only a couple people in the room would get. He just refers to himself as the Son of Man. But these people would have gleaned that. And so what you have is he's telling these people, you think I'm another rabbi. And you think I'm forgiving sins, and that's blasphemy. But this is who I actually am. So don't lose hope. Don't lose heart when you are, impacted by hard situations, or there are bad leaders around you, or in this particular situation, when you are oppressed by the Babylonians, like Daniel, or the Romans, like the Jews were in this story. He says, I'm building a new kingdom. This is a loaded thing he's saying. He's inviting them into a deeper understanding of the world as it actually is. And we have no sense that they got that. That he showed them what their life could be, and he showed them what will be. He gave them this eternal perspective. Let me close the passage out. And he says, which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your mat, and walk? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. So he said to the man, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. He, the man, the paralyzed man, got up, took his mat, and walked out in full view of them all. Catch that. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, we have never seen anything like this. So when he healed the guy, when he forgave the guy but didn't heal him, that was the best thing for him. He gave him an eternal perspective. When he challenged these teachers of the law and he told them who he actually is, he was giving them an eternal perspective. And here at the end, when he finally healed the guy, he did so in view of everyone. It doesn't record his response. It doesn't record the teachers of the law response. It records the response of the onlookers. So he did that for the onlookers. And all throughout this passage, he consistently calls people to an eternal perspective, what their life could be and will be. This is what Jesus does. We get so caught up, so wrapped in the here and the now and what's happening and what this person said or didn't say, that we lose perspective if we ever had it. And constantly Jesus says, no, your life is about so much more. Don't get so focused here and now. Don't get so caught up in this moment. You are an eternal being. Live like you know it. When I was in my early to mid-20s, I had graduated college. I had played basketball as every day, multiple times a day. And I played a little bit in college. I played in high school. And it was just like basketball was like life. But when you're playing basketball or doing anything competitive every day, multiple times a day, competition grows into this aspect of your life that is probably, as it was for me, unhealthy. I was telling a friend of mine this, who also was a competitive athlete, And he's like, oh, what I had to do was I had to not play sports at all for like 6 months. And not just not play sports, not compete at anything. Monopoly, jacks, hopscotch, nothing. Thumb war. I just had to go on a competition detox. Well, I heard this, and it's something I'd been working through in my heart for a while. And I was like, man, I don't want that at all. I love competition. I love playing sports. I'll compete at anything. Risk, you name it. Settlers of Catan, Mario Kart, this is anything. But when I heard that, I knew that I had to go in a competition detox. And so for the next 6 months, I didn't compete at anything. Hey man, do you want a thumb war? Nope, I'm not gonna compete right now. And what was that in my life? Did thumb war matter? No, but that's the point. That these things don't matter. Competition doesn't matter. Sports doesn't really matter if they're negatively impacting the health and well-being of my heart. Like they are an unhealthy short-term perspective. And so what this season of my life was an invitation to see what could be and what will be in my life, and to not let competition or sport get in the way of that. That's like a little thing from my story. And this week in small groups, I don't know what your story is. Is there something that God made you give up for a season? Was there a challenge he placed on your heart? Has there been something in your life where you had to pull back from the immediate, the now? Maybe it's been social media. Who knows what it is for you? You have to gain an eternal perspective on something. Is God calling you to do something now? To pull back from the here and the now, to gain an internal perspective on something. That's a challenge for you. That's hopefully something you can discuss in a small group that you'll be able to work through in community with your people this week. And so this is what I think this passage is, and this is the invitation Jesus consistently makes. I know you're living in a world now today that wants to grab, is eager, is desperate for your attention. But pull back from that. Just have an eternal perspective and look at what your life could be and will be. With that, I'm going to leave you with one final little verse. It's from Colossians 3:1, specifically in the New Living Translation. And may this be a prayer over you in your life. It says, set your sights on the realities of heaven. You think of heaven, future tense. But it says, set your sights here, now, today. On the realities of heaven, here, now, today. Live your life in such a way that you live knowing what your life can be, what God could do through your life, and what promises God has made you about your future. Thank you so much. God bless.